I should have known better than to host Thanksgiving dinner for my husband's family. But after 5 years of marriage to James, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could finally prove myself worthy of the prestigious Anderson family name. I spent 3 days cooking, following my grandmother's cherished recipes while adding my own contemporary twists. The turkey was brined to perfection. The sides were elegant yet comforting, and my signature pumpkin bread pudding was made with the same love that had earned me a spot as head pastry chef at one of the city's top restaurants. But Richard Anderson IUI didn't see love. He saw a threat. "Well," he announced, pushing away his barely touched plate, "I suppose this is what happens when we let someone with your background handle a family tradition." The table fell silent. My husband squeezed my hand under the table but said nothing. A silence that hurt more than his father's words. "My background?" I asked quietly, though I knew exactly what he meant. Before culinary school, I'd waited tables at one of his many restaurants to pay my bills. Dear, not everyone understands the sophistication required for proper haute cuisine, Richard's second wife, Patricia, added with fake sympathy. This is more like food for the help. I watched as they pushed away plates of my grandmother's recipes, dishes that had once won her local cooking competitions, even if they weren't served on silver platters. But it was what happened next that pushed me over the edge. Richard spotted my recipe box on the kitchen counter, my grandmother's handwritten cards mixed with my own creations. As conversations resumed around the table, he casually walked over and dropped the entire box into the trash. "For your own good," he said when he caught me watching. "The Anderson family has standards to maintain, just like we did with Caroline's little collection." Caroline, his first wife, the woman no one in the family ever discussed. What Richard didn't know was that 2 weeks ago, while helping James clean out his childhood home's attic, I found something extraordinary. Caroline's hidden recipe book, along with letters and diary entries that told a story Richard Anderson IUI never wanted revealed. "You know what's interesting about standards?" I said, standing up. "They're often built on other people's foundations." Richard's face paled slightly. "What are you implying?" I walked to my purse and pulled out Caroline's worn leather-bound book. Funny thing about recipe books, they tell stories. Like how a small-town waitress's original recipes somehow became the foundation of a restaurant empire. "Where did you get that?" Richard's voice shook. "The attic, along with Caroline's diaries. Fascinating reading, especially the parts about how you took her family recipes, claimed them as ancient Anderson traditions, and then discarded her once you had what you needed." Patricia looked between us, confusion crossing her perfectly arranged features. "Richard, what is she talking about?" "Nothing," he snapped. "She's talking about nothing." But I was already opening the book to a marked page. "Your famous Anderson family bourbon glazed pork chops?" That was Caroline's grandmother's recipe. "The signature Anderson crab cakes that built your first restaurant?" Caroline's creation from her days waiting tables in Maryland. James stood up. "Dad, what's going on?" "The Anderson Restaurant Group's entire original menu," I continued, "came from the woman you called too common for your family name. The woman whose recipes you stole before divorcing her and forcing her to sign an NDA. That's enough." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "Is it? Because Caroline's diaries tell quite a story. How you married a pretty young waitress, convinced her to share her family's recipes, and then discarded her once you had them all documented. How you threatened to ruin her if she ever told anyone the truth." The room was dead silent now. Even Patricia, who'd always treated me like something stuck to her designer heel, looked stunned. "Those recipes built your first successful restaurant," I said. "The one that launched everything else. And now you stand there, calling my food low class, while your entire empire was built on a small-town waitress's creativity." "You have no proof," Richard sputtered, but his face had gone from pale to ashen. I pulled out my phone. "Actually, I do. I found Caroline last week. She's a chef instructor now, teaching at a community college. We had quite an interesting conversation about recipe development and the statute of limitations on fraud." Richard lunged for the recipe book, but I stepped back. "Careful," I warned. "You wouldn't want to appear common by making a scene." "Those recipes are Anderson family property," he hissed. "No," I corrected. "They're the property of the people who created them. Just like my grandmother's recipes belong to me, not your trash can." James finally found his voice. All these years you said our family recipes went back generations, that we were descended from European chefs. Your father's great culinary heritage, I said gently, came from a woman who worked 60-hour weeks waiting tables to support her younger siblings. A woman who loved cooking so much she created her own recipes between shifts. Sound familiar? The parallel to my own story hung in the air. You'll destroy everything, Richard warned. The brand, the reputation. No, I interrupted. You did that yourself the moment you decided that where food comes from matters more than how it tastes. The moment you chose status over substance. I walked to the trash and retrieved my recipe box. Caroline wanted you to have something. I pulled out a sealed envelope and handed it to James. She thought her stepson should know the truth about his family's culinary heritage. This is absurd, Patricia declared, but her voice wavered. Richard would never. Check the dates on the recipes, I suggested. Check the original menu from his first restaurant. Everything matches Caroline's book, ingredient for ingredient. Richard's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. It was business, he said. I took basic recipes and elevated them. Made them sophisticated. You took someone else's art and claimed it as your birthright, I corrected. And then you had the audacity to call my food low class, while serving Caroline's recipes at $300 a plate. I picked up my barely touched turkey. I'm taking this to the homeless shelter where I volunteer. At least there, people appreciate food made with love instead of pretense. As I headed for the door, I turned back one last time. Oh, and Richard. Caroline's NDA expired last year. She's writing a cookbook. The real story of the Anderson family recipes. I hear publishers are very interested. The look of horror on Richard's face was better than any 5-star review. But this was just the beginning, because what happened next would shake the Anderson restaurant empire to its very foundation and reveal that Caroline's recipes weren't the only things Richard had stolen. The fallout was immediate and explosive. By the next morning, photos of Caroline's recipe book had leaked online, alongside vintage menus from Richard's first restaurant. Food critics and industry insiders quickly connected the dots. But it wasn't just about the recipes anymore. You need to see this, James said, bursting into our apartment the next day. He was holding a stack of papers from Caroline's envelope. Mom, she documented everything. The papers revealed a systematic pattern of theft that went far beyond family recipes. Financial statements showed that Caroline had invested her entire inheritance, money from her grandmother's life insurance, into Richard's first restaurant. Money that mysteriously vanished from the books after their divorce. $60,000 in 1985, James read, his voice shaking. That would be worth over $160,000 today, I finished. Your father didn't just steal her recipes. The documents showed that Caroline had been more than just a waitress with good recipes. She'd been Richard's full partner in launching the restaurant. But when success came, he'd erased her completely. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline herself. Check your email. There's more. The email contained video footage from 1985, grainy but clear enough. It showed a young Caroline in the restaurant kitchen, creating dishes while Richard watched and took notes. In one clip, she was teaching him how to properly sear scallops, the very technique he'd later claimed was passed down through generations of Anderson men. Dad built his whole image on being the self-made culinary genius, James said quietly, but he was just taking notes. Taking notes and taking credit, I corrected. Patricia, it turned out, had her own revelation to share. She showed up at our door that evening, clutching a glass of wine and looking decidedly less polished than usual. I found these in his study, she said, dropping a folder on our coffee table. Letters from other chefs, small restaurant owners, people who claimed he stole their concepts, their techniques. He threatened them all with lawsuits, I guessed. Patricia nodded. He told me they were just jealous of his success. I believed him, she laughed bitterly. I believed everything. The food industry was ruthless, and Richard had played the game masterfully. He'd taken ideas from smaller restaurants, replicated them with high-end ingredients, and claimed them as Anderson innovations. When the original creators protested, his lawyers buried them in paperwork. But Caroline had been different. She'd been his wife, his partner, and she kept proof. The media was having a field day. Food blogs were running side-by-side comparisons of Caroline's original recipes and Richard's signature dishes. The only real differences were the prices and the pretense. Then came the video that broke everything wide open. One of Richard's former sous chefs posted footage from 1986, just after Caroline had been forced out. It showed Richard in a rage, throwing out all the handwritten recipes Caroline had created for the kitchen staff, replacing them with printed cards bearing the Anderson family crest. From now on, he shouted in the video, "These are Anderson family traditions. Anyone who says different is fired." The chef who posted it included his own statement, "I watched him destroy that woman's legacy. It's time for the truth." Other former employees started coming forward. Servers who remember Caroline teaching them about wine pairings, line cooks who learned her techniques. Even the original dishwasher spoke up about how Caroline would feed the staff her new recipe trials. While Richard complained about wasting good ingredients on the help, Richard's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and he knew exactly who to blame. "This is your fault," he snarled when he showed up at our apartment unannounced. "You and your working-class vendetta against success." I looked at this man who'd spent decades building an empire on stolen dreams, who tried to throw away my own family recipes just like he'd thrown away Caroline's, and I felt nothing but pity. "No," I said calmly. "This is about honesty, something you wouldn't recognize if it was printed on a menu. I made those recipes better," he insisted. "I elevated them." "You didn't elevate anything," James interrupted, standing beside me. "You just added truffles and raised the prices." Richard turned to his son, desperation cracking his pompous facade. "Everything I did was to build something for you, a legacy." "A legacy of lies," James replied. "And now I have to decide what to do with it." Because that was the real crisis facing the Anderson restaurant group. James, as the primary heir and current executive chef of their flagship restaurant, had to choose: continue his father's charade or rebuild with truth as the main ingredient. The decision, as it turned out, wouldn't be entirely his to make, because Caroline wasn't just writing a cookbook. She was coming home, and she was bringing with her a surprise that would force every member of the Anderson family to reconsider the true meaning of legacy. "Your mother wants to meet for dinner," James said after Richard stormed out. "At her old diner." I smiled, thinking of my rescued recipe box and the love poured into every handwritten card. "Should I bring my grandmother's pumpkin bread pudding?" "Actually," James grinned, "she wants you to teach her how to make it." Said it's time for some new family traditions. But none of us could have predicted what Caroline would reveal over coffee and dessert. A secret that would change everything we thought we knew about the Anderson family. The diner looked exactly like the photos in Caroline's recipe book. A classic American institution with chrome fixtures and vinyl booths. Caroline was already there when we arrived, sitting in what she told us was her old section, a stack of papers beside her coffee cup. But she wasn't alone. "I'd like you to meet someone," Caroline said, gesturing to the young man beside her. "This is Michael, my son, your brother James." The coffee cup in James's hand clattered against its saucer. "What?" Michael, who looked to be in his early 30s, had Caroline's kind eyes and unmistakably the Anderson nose. "Richard didn't just take my recipes and my money," Caroline said quietly. "He took my chance to tell my son about his brother." The story spilled out over plates of diner pie. Caroline had been 2 months pregnant when Richard forced her out. He threatened to destroy her completely if she ever tried to claim the baby was his. Young, scared, and broke after Richard drained their accounts, she left town to start over. "I wanted to tell you so many times," Caroline told James. "But Richard's lawyers made it clear, if I ever contacted you, he'd make sure I lost everything, including Michael." Michael, who had grown up to become a food scientist, reached across the table to touch his brother's hand. "Mom told me about you my whole life. How you loved helping in the kitchen when you were little." "Dad said you died," James whispered to Caroline. "A car accident. He said that's why we never talked about you." I watched my husband absorb this truth, that his entire life had been seasoned with his father's lies. "I have something for you both," Caroline said, pulling out 2 worn leather-bound books. "My mother's complete recipe collection, one for each of my sons." As James and Michael pored over their grandmother's handwriting, I noticed Caroline studying me. "You know," she said, "I saw you once, years ago, working at Richard's restaurant. You reminded me so much of myself, trying so hard to prove yourself in his world. Is that why you left me the envelope?" She nodded. When I saw you'd married James, I knew you'd understand what those recipes really meant. That food isn't about status, it's about love." Speaking of love and food, Michael interjected, "We have a proposition for you both." He pulled out a business plan. Michael had been working on developing a line of artisanal food products, combining traditional recipes with modern nutrition science. He needed partners who understood both innovation and tradition. "We want to launch a new brand," Caroline explained, "using my original recipes, James's fine dining experience, and Michael's scientific expertise. But most importantly," she smiled at me, "we want your creativity. Your grandmother's recipes deserve to be shared too." "Anderson Family Classics?" I read from the proposal. "No," James said firmly. "Caroline's Kitchen. It's time for the real family name to be on the door." Over the next hour, we planned a future built on truth instead of pretense. A food company that would honor tradition while embracing innovation. A family business that actually cared about family. "Richard will try to stop us," I warned. Looking at our newly expanded family, I realized that Richard had been wrong about one more thing. True sophistication isn't about expensive ingredients or fancy presentations. It's about the courage to be authentic, to honor where you come from while creating something new. 6 months later, when we opened the first Caroline's Kitchen, we served my grandmother's pumpkin bread pudding alongside Caroline's famous crab cakes. The line stretched around the block. Richard sent a cease and desist letter. We sent back a patent infringement notice and an invitation to dinner. He never responded to either. But sometimes, on quiet evenings, I see him standing outside the restaurant, watching families share meals made from recipes written with love instead of pretense. And I always save him a slice of bread pudding, just in case he finally learns that the best family traditions are the ones that make room for everyone at the table.